The next sutta is 6.6.59. Once when the Exalted One was staying in the brick hall at Nadika, a householder, a wood seller, visited him, saluted and sat down at one side. So seated, the Exalted One said to him, "Maybe, householder, alms are given by your family." "Oh yes, Lord, and in this way too, such monks as are forest monks, almsmen," that means beggar monks, rag wearers, arahants, or men won to the arahant's way, to them, Lord, alms are given by my family. And the Exalted One said, "But surely, householder, it's a hard thing for you, a layman, engrossed in pleasures, encumbered with children, perfumed with kasi sandalwood, decked with flowers and scented oils, merry with silver and gold, to tell which are arahants and which have won to the arahant's way. If a forest-gone monk householder be puffed up, proud, excitable, a mouthy speechifier, forgetful of mindfulness, not self-possessed nor composed, a scatterbrained, uncontrolled in their senses, he on that count is blameworthy. If he be not puffed up, etc., but upright in mindfulness, self-possessed, composed, one-pointed, controlled in faculties, he on that account is praiseworthy. So too of the monk dwelling on the village outskirts, the almsman, the guest monk, the rag wearer, the wearer of the robe given by the householder. If they be puffed up, uncontrolled in their senses, on that account they are blameworthy. But if on the contrary then they are praiseworthy. Nevertheless, householder, give alms to the Sangha. As you do so, your heart will become tranquil, and tranquil in heart, you will, on the breaking up of the body after death, arise in the good way, the heaven world." And he replied, "I, Lord, henceforth from today will give alms to the Sangha." That's the end of the sutta. You see, this man, he says that his family gives alms food to monks who are arahants, who are forest monks, who are rag wearers, etc. But the Buddha said, as a layman, it's very hard for you to tell who are arahants and who have won to the arahant's way. And the Buddha said, the most sensible thing to see is whether that monk is unmindful or whether he's mindful, whether he's composed or not composed, whether he's controlled in his senses or not controlled in his senses. But nevertheless, the Buddha said, give alms to the Sangha as a whole. Then you will walk the good way and have a good rebirth. Now, in one of the suttas, the Buddha said, it's a duty of lay persons to serve the Sangha. And in another sutta, the Buddha said, in the future there would be those who wear the yellow robe, who do not practice well. But even then, if you give alms to the Sangha as a whole, you are doing your duty and you help to preserve the Sangha. That means the lineage of the Sangha is not broken. And then even though they are not good monks at the moment, yet because the Sangha is not broken, the line of the Sangha is not broken, then in the future there still can be arahants. But if lay persons stop supporting monks because they are not good practicing monks, then the Sangha could be broken, and then in the future there will be no more monks. The next sutta, which is quite a good sutta, is 6.6.60. Once when the Exalted One dwelt near Benares in the deer park at Isipatana, a number of elders, Theras, who had returned from alms gathering and eaten, sat together in the round hall and talked a talk on the higher Dhamma. Now, from time to time, the Venerable Citta Hati Sariputta broke in on their talk, and the Venerable Mahakotita said to him, "Let not the Venerable Citta Hati Sariputta constantly interrupt the elders' talk on the higher Dhamma. The Venerable Citta should wait until the talk is over." And when he had thus spoken, Citta's friend said, "The Venerable Mahakotita should not censure the Venerable Citta Hati Sariputta. A wise man is the Venerable Citta, and able to talk to the elders on the higher Dhamma." And the Venerable Mahakotita replied, "It's a hard thing, sirs, for those who know not another person's ways of thought. Consider, sirs, a person who, so long as he lives near the master or a fellow teacher in the holy life, is the most humble of the humble, the meekest of the meek, the quietest of the quiet, and who, when he leaves the master or his fellow teachers, keeps company with monks, nuns, lay disciples, men and women, rajas, their ministers, course setters, that means external ascetic leaders, or their disciples, living in company, unhampered, rude, given over to gossip. Passion corrupts his heart, and with his heart corrupted by passion, he disavows the training and returns to the lower life. Suppose, sirs, an ox, a meadow browser, were kept tied by a rope or closed in a cowshed. Would he say rightly who should say, 'Never now will that meadow browser venture again to a meadow'?" And Chitta's friend said, "No, indeed, sir, such a thing does not happen, since that ox used to browsing in meadows would, on snapping its rope or breaking out of the cowshed, venture down to the meadow again." Venerable Mahakotita said, "Even so, sirs, where a person, so long as he is near the master or a fellow teacher, is the most humble of the humble, meekest of the meek, quietest of the quiet, but who, on leaving the master or his fellow teachers, keeps company with monks, nuns, lay disciples, etc., passion corrupts his heart, and he returns to the lower life. Consider again a person who, aloof from sensual desires, enters and abides in the first jhana, thinking, 'I've won to the first jhana.' He keeps company with monks, nuns, lay disciples, etc., and returns to the lower life. Suppose, sirs, the rain deva rains heavy rains at the 4 crossroads, lays the dust and makes mud. Would he say rightly who should say, 'Never now will dust again appear at these 4 crossroads'? No, indeed, sir, since along those 4 crossroads men, ox, and cows might pass, or the wind and heat might dry up the moisture, and then the dust would appear again. It is even so, sirs, when a person enters and abides in the first jhana, and keeps company with monks, nuns, lay disciples, etc., he returns to the lower life. Then consider a person who, suppressing applied and sustained thought, enters and abides in the second jhana, thinking, 'I've won to the second jhana.' He keeps company with monks, nuns, and lay disciples, etc., and he returns to the lower life. Suppose, sirs, a great lake near some village or town, and the rain deva were to rain great rains and cover the mussels and shells and sand and pebbles. Would he say rightly who should say, 'Never now in this great lake shall the mussels, shells, sand, and pebbles appear again'?" And Chitta's friend said, "No, indeed, sir, since men or ox and cows might come and drink from the great lake, or wind and heat dry up the moisture, and then the mussels, shells, sand, and pebbles would appear again." And the Venerable Chitta Mahakotita said, "It is even so, sirs, where a person enters and abides in the second jhana and keeps company with monks, nuns, lay disciples, etc., he returns to the lower life. Consider then the person who, with the fading away of delight, piti, enters and abides in the third jhana, thinking, 'I've won to the third jhana.' He keeps company with monks, nuns, lay disciples, etc., and returns to the lower life. Suppose, sirs, last night's food pleased not a man filled with good food. Would he say rightly who should say, 'Never now shall food please this man again'? No, indeed, sir, this is not the case. As long as the strength from the good food remain in his body, other food shall not please that man. But when that strength has gone, then shall food please him again." And the Venerable Mahakotita said, "It is even so, sirs, where a person enters and abides in the third jhana and keeps company with monks, nuns, lay disciples, etc., he returns to the lower life. Consider the person who, putting away pleasure and pain, enters and abides in the fourth jhana, thinking, 'I've won to the fourth jhana.' He keeps company with monks, nuns, lay disciples, etc., and returns to the lower life. Imagine, sirs, a pond in a mountain valley, windless, waveless. Would he say rightly who should say, "Never now on this pond shall waves appear again"? And they said, "No, indeed, sir, since were a squall to come very strongly from the east, it would bring waves to the pond. So likewise were a squall to come from the west, the north, or the south." And Venerable Mahakotita said, "It is even so, sirs, where a person enters and abides in the fourth jhana, and keeps company with monks, nuns, lay disciples, etc., and he returns to the lower life. And consider the person who, paying no attention to signs, enters and abides in the signless mental concentration, thinking, 'I have won to the signless mental concentration.' He keeps company with monks, nuns, lay disciples, men and women, rajas, their ministers, courtiers, and their disciples. Living in company, unhampered, rude, given over to gossip, passion corrupts his heart, and with his heart corrupted by passion, he disavows the training and returns to the lower life. Suppose, sirs, a Raja or his minister with the 4 hosts of the army were to come up to the high road and pitch their camp for one night in the forest, and the sound of the cricket be drowned by the sound of elephant, horse, chariot, and foot soldier, by the sound of tabor, drum, and conch. Would he say rightly who should say, "Never now in this forest shall the cricket be heard again"? No, indeed, sir, this is not the case, for when the Raja and his minister have left the forest, and the army have left the forest, the cricket shall be heard again. It is even so, sirs, where a person, unattentive to signs, enters and abides in the signless mental concentration, and thinking, "I've won to that," keeps company with monks, nuns, lay disciples, etc., living in company, unhampered, rude, given to gossip, passion corrupts his heart, and he returns to the lower life. And later, the Venerable Citta Hati Sariputta disavowed the training and returned to the lower life. Then Citta's friends went to the Venerable Mahakotita and said, "Did the Venerable Mahakotita discover Citta Hati Sariputta by mind encompassing mind concerning the thought? This and that state of attainment has Citta won to, but he will give up the training and return to the lower life. Or did Devas tell him this? Citta Hati Sariputta, sir, has won this and that, but he will return to the lower life." And Venerable Mahakotita said, "Reverend sirs, I discovered it by mind encompassing mind, but Devas also told me." Then the Venerable Citta's friends approached the Exalted One, saluted him and sat down at one side. And so seated they said to him, "Lord, Citta Hati Sariputta has won to this and that state of attainment, yet he has disavowed the training and returned to the lower life." And the Buddha said, Citta monks will before long think of renouncing the worldly life." And not long after, Citta Hati Sariputta had his hair and beard shaved off, donned the yellow robe, and went forth from the home to the homeless life. And the Venerable Citta Hati Sariputta, living alone, secluded, earnest, ardent, resolved, not long after, entered and abode in that aim above all of the holy life, realizing it here and now by his own knowledge, for the sake of which clansmen rightly go forth from the home to the homeless life. And he knew, birth is destroyed, the holy life is lived, done is what was to be done, there is no more of this to come. And the Venerable Citta Hati Sariputta was numbered among the Arahants. That's the end of the sutta. This sutta is quite interesting. It shows that a person like the Venerable Citta, even though he has attained the jhanas, attained even perhaps even this signless concentration, a very still state of mind, and yet he could disrobe because he mixed too much with other people. Because he mixed too much with other people, he talked too much, and then his heart was disturbed, and his mind was disturbed, and he returned to the lay life. But the Venerable Mahakotita, this Arahant, could read his mind. That's why this Venerable Mahakotita gave this warning. And true enough, the Venerable Citta disrobed. But later the Buddha said he will come back. He will come back as a monk, and Venerable Citta did come back. And after that he practiced and he attained the Arahanthood. This shows that a person who has won to jhana can still disrobe. And the point here is that seclusion or aloofness is very important for a monk. Even if he stay in a monastery with other monks, he should try not to talk too much, otherwise he will lose his supernormal states like jhana. But you can see, like a person like this Chitta, because he has attained to such a high states of bliss, when he disrobed and he went back to lay life, he could never be happy, because the happiness from lay life is lower than the happiness of the jhanic bliss. So it is quite natural for him, who has already attained jhanic bliss, to renounce and come back to robes again. And the next sutta is 6.6.61. Once when the Exalted One dwelt near Benares in the deer park at Isipatana, a number of elders who returned from alms gathering and eaten sat together in the round hall, and this talk by chance arose. This, sirs, was said by the Exalted One in the way to the beyond in the questions of Maitreya. Who knows both ends and does not cling to the middle, him I call a great man. He here has passed beyond the seamstress. And they said, and what, pray, is the first end? What's the second? What's in the middle? And who's the seamstress? I'll just stop here to comment. This passage that they quoted the Buddha as saying, who knows both ends and does not cling to the middle, him I call a great man. He here has passed beyond the seamstress. This was said in a sutta, in the Sutta Nipata. In the Sutta Nipata, there's a sutta where many Brahmins came to see the Buddha, and they asked questions, many questions. And this was one of the things that the Buddha mentioned. And so these elder monks, they asked this question. They wanted somebody to explain what is the first end, what is the second, and what's in the middle, and who's the seamstress. Now after this had been said, one of the monks answered the elders and said, contact, sirs, is the first end, its arising is the second, its ceasing is in the middle, and craving is the seamstress, for craving soars one just to this ever-becoming birth. Indeed, sirs, to this extent a monk knows the knowable, comprehends the comprehensible, and knowing the knowable, comprehending the comprehensible, he makes an end of ill or dukkha here and now. And when he had thus spoken, another monk said, the past is the first end, the future is the second, and present is in the middle, and craving is the seamstress, etc. And he makes an end of ill. And another said, pleasure is the first end, pain is the second, indifference is in the middle, and craving is the seamstress, etc. as before. And another said, name, nama, is the first end, form, rupa, is the second, consciousness is in the middle, and craving is the seamstress. And another said, 6 sense organs are the first end, the 6 outer objects are the second, consciousness is in the middle, and craving is the seamstress. And another said, life's bundle is the first end, its arising is the second, its ceasing is in the middle, and craving is the seamstress, for craving soars one just to this ever-becoming birth. Indeed, sirs, to this extent a monk knows the knowable, comprehends the comprehensible, and knowing the knowable, comprehending the comprehensible, he makes an end of dukkha here and now. And when he had finished speaking, another monk addressed the elders and said, we have all, reverend sirs, replied as the matter appeared to each one of us. Let us go and visit the Exalted One and tell him. As the Exalted One declares, so will we bear in mind. Very well, rejoined the elders, and they approached the Exalted One, saluted and sat down at one side. And so seated, they told him all the words and talk that had passed between them, adding, Lord, who spoke best? Each one of you monks in his own way spoke well, but as to what I spoke of in the way to the beyond in Maitreya's questions, who knows both ends and does not cling to the middle, him I call a great man. He here has passed beyond the seamstress. Listen, pay good heed, I will speak. Yes, Lord, they replied. And the Exalted One said, verily, contact monks is the first end, its arising is the second, its ceasing is in the middle, and craving is the seamstress, for craving soars a man just to this ever-becoming birth. Verily, monks, it is to this extent that the monk knows the knowable, comprehends the comprehensible, and knowing the knowable, comprehending the comprehensible, he makes an end of dukkha here and now. That's the end of the sutta. This Buddha said that all the answers given by the monks were very good. But even though all of them were very good, yet his meaning was just as the first monk had spoken. And this is one of those suttas, when you read this or you listen to it the first time, you find it very difficult to understand. It's one of those suttas where you have to read it and again and think about it, think many times about it, and read and think about it, and slowly you'll find the answers are very interesting. Another sutta, I don't know whether I can finish. Once while the Exalted One walked a tour among the Kosalis with a great company of the Sanghas monks, he came to a Kosalan town called Dandakapaka, and the Exalted One stepped down from the road and sat on a seat made ready at the foot of a tree. But the monks entered Dandakapaka to seek a lodging. Now the Venerable Ananda with a number of monks went to the river Achiravati to bathe his limbs, and after he had bathed and had come out, he stood in one garment drying his limbs. Then a monk approached the Venerable Ananda and said, Ananda, Reverend Sir, was it after concentrating his whole mind that Devadatta was declared by the Exalted One, gone wayward, hell bound for a kappa or an aeon or a world cycle, unpardonable is Devadatta? Or was it from some Deva source he learnt it? I'll just stop here for a moment. This monk had heard that the Buddha had said that the Devadatta, one of his disciples who had tried to harm the Buddha, had gone to hell for a world cycle, and he was doubtful. So he asked, was it the Buddha knew it himself from his mind reading the mind of Devadatta, or did he learn it from some Deva? This Devadatta had caused schism in the Sangha, split the Sangha, and tried to kill the Buddha, and later he died. So the Buddha said that he had gone to hell. And then the Venerable Ananda said, it was even as the Exalted One has declared. Now the Venerable Ananda approached the Exalted One, saluted and sat down at one side. And so seated he told the Exalted One all that had occurred. Then the Exalted One said, either Ananda, that monk must be new, not long gone forth, or if an elder, a witless one. How, when I have definitely declared it, can there be an alternative? I know not another person of whom this was declared by me after full mental concentration, save of Ananda. And so long, Ananda, as I saw a bright spot in Devadatta, even the prick end of a horse hair in size, I declared not, Devadatta is wayward gone, hell bound for a kappa, unpardonable. But it was when I saw none that I declared thus. Imagine, Ananda, a cesspool of a man's depth, brimful of dung, and a man had fallen in, head and all. And then a man appeared, ready to help, to do the friendly, to set him in safety, to lift him out. Yet were he to go all round that cesspool, he would not see even the prick end of a horse hair of that man, unsmeared by dung, by which to grasp and lift him out. And it is even so with Devadatta Ananda. When I saw not a bright spot in him, not even the prick end of a horse hair in size, that I declared, gone wayward, hell bound for a kalpa, unpardonable is Devadatta. Would you hear, Ananda, the Tathagata, analyzing the feelings and thoughts of man? This is the time, O Blessed One, this is the time, O well-gone one, for the Exalted One to analyze men's feelings and thoughts. The monks, having heard, will bear it in mind. Well, listen, Ananda, pay good heed, I will speak. Yes, Lord, rejoined the Venerable Ananda, and the Exalted One said, suppose, Ananda, by mind encompassing mind, I know this of some person, there is both good and evil in him. Then presently, by the same means I know, the good has disappeared, the evil is uppermost, but the root of goodness is not cut off, and from that good will proceed. Thus in future he is bound not to fall. If, Ananda, seed neither split, rotten, nor spoiled by wind and heat by vital, well-seasoned, be thrown on well-tilled ground in a good field, can you say for certain it will yield its growth, increase and abundance? Yes, surely, Lord. Even so, Ananda, by mind encompassing mind, I know of some person there is good and evil in him, and then the good has disappeared, the evil is uppermost, but the root of goodness is not cut off, and from that good will proceed. Thus he is bound not to fall in the future. Verily, Ananda, thus by mind encompassing mind, the person of man is known to the Tathagata. Thus by mind encompassing mind, the feelings and thoughts of man are known to the Tathagata. Thus by mind encompassing mind, the future arising of things is known to the Tathagata. Or suppose by mind encompassing mind, I know the converse of some person, in future he is bound to fall. If seed, neither split, rotten, and so forth, be thrown on stony ground, can you say for certain it will not yield its growth, increase, or abundance? Yes, surely, Lord. Even so, Ananda, I know of some person, he is bound to fall. Verily, Ananda, thus by mind encompassing mind, the person of man, his thoughts and feelings, and the future arising of things are known to the Tathagata. Then suppose I know of some person, there's not a bright spot the size of a hair's prick end in him, and being utterly black in his evil, he will, on the breaking up of the body after a death, rise in the wayward way, the ill way, the abyss, hell. Ananda, if seed, split, rotten, spoiled by wind and heat, be thrown on well-tilled ground in a good field, can you say for certain it will not yield growth, increase, or abundance? Yes, surely, Lord. Even so, Ananda, I know of some persons, he will rise in hell. Thus by mind encompassing mind, the person is known to the Tathagata. So I don't have time to finish all the types of persons that the Buddha enumerated in this sutta, but they are not so important. The thing about it is that this sutta is one of those which shows that the Buddha did predict that Devadatta will go to hell, that he is an evil person. Or he was an evil person, and because of that he will suffer for a world cycle in hell. But later books try to say that Devadatta was a bodhisattva, and he's not really suffering even though he has gone to hell. But this contradicts the earlier suttas as shown here. So I'll stop here, and if you have any questions or comments, we can discuss.